So good morning. I hope you've all had your coffee because we're going to talk about ethics. Good, I got you to laugh. The first point is definitely connecting with the audience. So you heard a little bit about me. I'm the CEO of Peoria Rural Communications. I'm out in Doylestown Township. Anyone here from Bucks County? Welcome. Long drive. How about Philadelphia? Anyone here from near Philadelphia? That's my hometown, South Philly Italian. And yes, I did watch Rocky run down the street when I was a little girl. So I absolutely love this state. I love what I get to do. I am a licensed attorney. I did practice law. I worked for the city of Philadelphia for some time. And because I ended up doing so many high-profile trials, I have a very unique perspective in what I do. And I love what I do, which makes it a lot more fun. So I'm going to talk a lot about social media ethics today and social media policies. I know that you heard from Cranberry Township yesterday, and the ladies talked a lot about the benefits of social media and how to use it and to maximize it. So why does social media matter? Anyone? And I'm going to interact with you throughout, so please feel free to ask questions throughout. We have a nice amount of time to cover this subject, but why does it matter? Anybody? Everyone's using it?
It can relay good information as well as bad or misinformation.
It can convey good information as well as bad information, or misinformation, I think you said. Why else? Yes?
It can convey information
Quickly, yes, it can convey information quickly. And that's really one of the most important keys, is the timeliness and the relevance. And we can also spy on our family members, kids, and employees. No, don't spy on your employees, I'm joking. Social media is just that, it's social. And I think where we fail often is that a lot of entities go on social media and it's a one-way street. Oh no, we can't enable comments. Somebody might criticize us. The best information you could ever get is when somebody has something critical to say, because then you have the opportunity to address it and learn from it. So remember, there's a lot of ways to use social media to manage and understand what people are thinking and to be able to address it as well. But it's social. It's not a one-way street. It's not a push vehicle. It was never meant to be a push vehicle. Most of us are still using it that way as we get comfortable. And that's okay, because you need to listen first. They always say listen to the other person before you start speaking. So you want to do that too. But then as you get comfortable, it can promote conversation and engagement and more volunteerism, more community participation. Are any of you familiar with the Travis Manion Foundation? Anybody? If you're not, look it up. Travis Manion was a soldier from Doylestown who went in the line of fire to save his platoon mates and passed. And the Travis Manion Foundation has done this incredible job. That was in 2007 when he died, because I helped to organize the memorial with the borough. Since 2007, they have grown this foundation nationwide. The majority of it being done through social media. It is a huge organization. They do the Heroes Run all over the United States. They've been on the Today Show. It's amazing what they've been able to do by embracing, and somebody said it, everybody's using it, right? So they're talking to the people there. So it's social. Some statistics that I want you to be aware of, since you're numbers people. 79% of online Americans use Facebook, which is 68% of the population. Think about that. It feels insane. It feels like, I didn't have a cell phone when I went to law school. I, even in communications, did not want to be an early adopter, even though I had to be. No, I don't want to be on Facebook. I don't need everybody knowing what I'm doing. And then some of these other statistics, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Twitter. And I only use these channels because for your entities, I'm not suggesting that you be everywhere or try to be everywhere. I'm suggesting that you understand where your people are and where they're communicating. Do any of you are familiar with a group, like a Facebook group in your township or municipality or county that is just for people there? Raise your hands. If you're not familiar with it and you're on Facebook, you better start looking. So we have in Doylestown alone, we've got the Doylestown group, nearly 15,000 members. You want to know what's going on in Doylestown when you hear those fire engines go by? Just go to that group. Okay? I'm not kidding. In the last storm, in the first nor'easter this year, the first of 4 nor'easters that we had this year, we were on my farm, we were out of power for 4 days. I heard siren after siren after siren. I said to my husband, something bad is happening. It's not just power. Go outside, I see the sirens at the top of the street. I go on Facebook because I had power on my iPad, and lo and behold, our neighbor's house was on fire. How did I find out? Somebody posted it. So-and-so's house is on fire. We were able to mobilize the community and go and help. What do we need? How can we help them? Where can we get them shelter right away? In pouring rain, lines down, trees falling. It was a 4-alarm fire. I knew where it was within seconds of going online. It's really interesting when you talk about the immediacy of these things. But if you're not familiar with your local groups, I guarantee you there are at least one, if not several. We then have Doylestown Uncensored, because on the Doylestown group, we don't post anything negative. They don't say, it's a policy not to talk negatively about local companies or the government or anything like that. It's really about sharing goodwill and information. Then we have Doylestown Uncensored, where you can say anything you want. That has less members, interestingly enough. The negative stuff has less members and is more populated by the younger generations. I find it interesting because I look at these things. I love to figure out who's there, who's talking, why does it matter? Then we have the Doylestown garage sale group. We have a Bucks County garage sale group, and then there's a Chalfont group, and then there's a New Britain group. And so this is just within a, 15-mile radius, right? So there are all of these groups where there is information relevant. And I have told the people who sit in your positions and on the boards in Doylestown that they need to be monitoring these platforms. Is it a full-time job? No, but somebody should be looking regularly. And they need to be communicating there as well. So I mentioned about the 79%, the majority of Facebook users are women, although it's not a large majority. People are on there daily, several times a day. And it generates nearly 25% of website referral traffic. Think about that. People go to websites when they see information on Facebook. How many of you have even a personal profile on Facebook? How many of you know someone who has a profile on Facebook? Come on. If everybody doesn't raise their hands, they're sleeping. My daughter now, so she's going off to Bucknell in the fall, and I'm very proud of that. And she just created a Facebook page to connect with her friends from high school and to connect with the students at Bucknell, because they have these groups where they can get to know one another and who's going to study biology, and they're just wonderful tools. And fortunately, she has a psychotic mother who does ethics training and looks at everything she posts. I don't really have to worry about her, is the truth, but I've ingrained it in them, and that's one of the other things we're going to talk about. You can't expect people to do the right thing if you don't tell them what the right thing is. Think about that. I had this conversation yesterday, and I said to someone, we're planning a shower for my niece's wedding, and I said, if she doesn't want the gifts there, and she doesn't want them wrapped because she lives in another state, she needs to say it implicitly in the invitation. Please print a photo and ship to our home address in XYZ state. Because otherwise, us traditionalists will wrap the gift. We're going to be all so excited, we're going to put it on the table, and then she's not going to open it. Right? But you have to give very specific guidelines. But not just write them and say, oh, by the way, we have a social media policy. You need to educate people on them. So these are the types of things we talk about. Twitter. Anyone on Twitter? Anybody's entities on Twitter? Anybody ever have to deal with the media on a local story, or your municipalities or organizations have to deal with a local story with the media? No one's ever had a story in the media? Number one place where they go to find resources and information, Twitter. I was found for a national publication because they were searching for an expert on Twitter and found me because of my ethics prowess. So interestingly enough, if you want to get your message out and you want to connect with the media and you want them to know your side of the story, great tool. This always surprises people, the age of people on Twitter. It's not so much the kids. They're on that thing we call Snapchat that we all don't want to try to figure out. Again, a great tool, but you got to start somewhere. So I'm not even going to talk about Snapchat in that way. LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn is the most professional, it's like an online resume for the whole world, right? Is it going to really affect how you communicate with the masses? No, absolutely not. Is it going to help you with your recruitment efforts for great talent? Absolutely yes. So one of the other things, and as we talk about strategic planning, we're also going to talk about setting goals and understanding why you're on these platforms. Because there is a reason to be there, but you have to understand what the reason is first. You have to understand the goal so that the information you're putting there is relevant to that audience. I will tell you, I mean, even from a business perspective, every prospective employee I've ever interviewed, every business prospect I've ever met with, I've searched every social media. I look at what they're doing, how they're engaging. I look at the individuals. Are they early adopters, or do I have a lot of teaching to do? I mean, these are really wonderful tools. So and they're, for the most part, free. I mean, we're not going to get into all the giving away data stuff today. But when you think about having free real estate, that billboard, as you will, that's $30,000 a month, but you have it right here, and you can own that. You really want to think about it, because we have maximized clients' budgets by focusing on content development and content sharing, which is social media, versus things like billboards and print advertisements and flyers and printed newsletters. I'm afraid to ask, how many of you still do printed newsletters? Okay. You want to save money? Don't do printed newsletters. Just have a few, just for the few people who absolutely have to get them that way. So managing your social media profiles. Do you really understand the benefits? And the Cranberry Township did a really good presentation yesterday on the benefits. And I'll talk a little bit about those today. Do you understand the pitfalls, risks, and liabilities? That's something we're going to talk about today. What protocols can be implemented? That's your policy and training. And what best practices can be implemented for the successful use? Social media doesn't have to be that scary, ugly thing that none of us grew up with. Like I said, when I was in law school, I didn't have a cell phone. Anybody remember the big bag phones? Okay, so I'm a third-generation lawyer, and I'm an only child and a daughter of an Italian dad. I got the big bag phone in my car. I'm like, Dad, what am I supposed to do with this? He's like, anywhere you drive, you will have this phone with you, and if you have an emergency, you can call 911, right? 2 weeks later, I was nearly carjacked. Not joking. It was written up in Reader's Digest because I was one of the first people to use a phone to call 911 because my dad was this early adopter. Kid you not, though they were prosecuted, in fact, and found guilty. So it's so interesting, though, when I tell my kids this story and they look at me like I'm nuts. A bag phone? It kind of was bigger than my handbag. So it's interesting. So where do we begin? This is an overall view of what we're going to be talking about in terms of the social media planning. So when you go back, if you download the materials, this particular page is going to be very useful to you because it has all of the information in it. So if you go to put together a social media strategy and policy, also known as a content marketing plan, this is all in one place. So determine your goals. What might any one of your organizations want to accomplish using social media? Anybody? Getting the right story out. Yes, getting the correct story out. Absolutely. Yes? Quickly, getting the story out quickly. Yes. What else? Yes. So getting people to interact in the community, like volunteerism type things?
They're like flying kite day.
Oh, okay. So your events, getting people to participate in the community events. Excellent. What else?
Getting help from people in a police investigation.
Police investigations, absolutely. Getting help from the community. Lost dogs. That was one of the examples yesterday. I see that almost every day. Road closures. How many of you have pothole issues right now? $990 later when my daughter hit a pothole on one of our roads 2 weeks ago. These are the things where, just this week alone, I've been back and forth to visit with my father-in-law, and every day, one of the roads has tree service, pothole service. Oftentimes, I'm able to, if it's right within my township or county, I'm able to figure that out before I head out, so I can take different roads. But this is really helpful stuff, right? It makes people's lives easier. You might be looking for some new talent. We talked about that a little bit. And what are the business goals? Your business goals are different than social goals. You might need to raise taxes next year. You might want to start to get community buy-in. People are more likely to buy in when they understand reasoning. So you can use it to communicate needs and things. So there's so many different ways. So understanding what they are. And this just goes through many of them. Brand awareness, citizen participation, we heard. Crime watch, customer service. It does increase trust and confidence in your community. Because, we live in such a transparent world now that when you're not communicating, people think you're trying to hide. And one of the things that municipalities has to overcome, all of them have to overcome, are issues of trust. And we know that. We know that. We know that there's still this idea of, it's Big Brother, or it's all an all boys club, which is the way it used to be. And there's all those things that we've heard, and they're just going to decide the way they're going to decide no matter who shows up. I know you've heard that. I've gone to township meetings. I've gone to school board meetings. I've seen this over and over and over again. Communicating allows you to create trust and confidence, and it allows you to get your jobs done more efficiently and effectively. I mentioned media relations, poll and election forecasting. It's always used for forecasting. Real-time communications, supports your mission and objectives. I do a lot of reputation and crisis management at my company. So oftentimes we will be called in. We deal with one township, and I'm going to leave the name out, where we handled communications as it relates to the pipeline and some of Sunoco contaminating water and things like that. Another one that we've publicly represented is Tinicum Township in Delaware County with their lawsuit against the city of Philadelphia when they were going to condemn homes for the expansion of the Philadelphia airport. They didn't have a social media plan back then, but we got them engaged there. And then when we went to have our community meetings, our town hall meetings, it was the best way to get people to show up. We were able to anticipate their questions and their concerns so that our key messages spoke to those things. So when you think about how these tools can be used to really leverage them to your benefit, that's the message management. And again, I've mentioned transparency. So has anybody conducted a social audit, a social media audit of what's going on in your community? I purposely use the word audit with this audience, as opposed to assessment. In other audiences, I say assessment because they hear audit and they run out the door. So understanding who your target audience is. And your target audience may differ by message. If you're talking about voting, your target audience, even though you want to be influencing the 16 and 17-year-olds who are going to vote, hopefully, in soon years to come, you really want to be talking to that audience that does vote and should be voting, right? So knowing where are they. So really knowing who are the volunteers in your communities. Are they the retirees? Are they the students? Are they the stay-at-home moms? Are they all of the above? Are they the working members of your community? I mean not to stereotype anyone. I'm just saying, who are they? Understanding the socio-demographics of the people who are going to show up. That data, I mean, this is why we're fighting with Google and Facebook, because they have data. And that data matters. Then the other question is, who's engaged? It's not just who's the audience, but who's actually there. The kids really, today, the kids in high school, I should say, and middle school, they're really not on Facebook yet. They're waiting. They used to want to go on before they were 13 and fake their age. Now they're like, oh no, I don't even want to be on there. And then they're like, oh, I have to be on there because I'm going to college and I need to connect with people. So where are you reaching the youth in your community? Snapchat. It's the bane of my, I still haven't figured it out. By the way, they created Snapchat so that those of us of the older generations can't figure it out. I'm not joking. They created it because it's not linear. We think in a very linear fashion. Today's youth do not. They weren't raised to think in a linear fashion. So where we read, left to right, top to bottom, and so when we look at things on a web page, for example, we read the same way. Kids don't. It's like they go this way, that way, and they can figure it out. And I just sit there going, are you kidding me? Right? But it's interesting because that's why these tools work for the younger generation and not us. And there were studies done on that. So it's interesting. But who's engaged? Where are they? What protocol do you have and you need? And is there a budget? And if not, can you do it internally? Again, you have to train people. A content strategy. Does anybody want to tell me what I mean by content strategy? This is where I'm getting the glazed. What do you mean? What are you sharing? What is the content of what you are sharing? Are you sharing that, hey, next week is Flag Day. Come out and join us for the flag raising. It's Veterans Day. It's Valentine's Day. We have a community event. We're doing a road cleanup. All of those things are content. Then what you share, and I'm going to get a lot more into visuals, but what you share is important. How you say it is important. How you engage people is important. which social media outlets work best, and when are they engaging. Interestingly enough, I had an argument on a webinar with a colleague of mine because she said, well, everybody's engaging at rush hour. I'm like, well, that's an issue if they're driving. She's like, no, they're on the train. I'm like, you live in New York. Of course they're on the train. I live in rural Pennsylvania. They're not engaging then. They're engaging in the morning and at 10 o'clock at night. So what's interesting is the same audience, different locations, different times of engagement. Important to understand that, because if you want to reach your audience, do it when they're there, not when you are there. Which means it's not necessarily happening between 8:30 and 5:30 during the day. Why does that feel like an issue? Because a lot of people don't know that you can schedule these things. Important to know. Because you really do want to engage people when they are there. Otherwise, you're wasting your time and energy, and we don't want any of you to do that because that's inefficient and not a good use of your time and budget. We've talked a little bit about the types of topics that are important in the benefits and school closings. How many of you have had a school close for any reason in the last couple of years? I purposely didn't put a number of years on it. What are we dealing with, right? And as parents, I want to know what's going on at the school. I have to say, and I do use Doylestown in my examples, they've been phenomenal at communicating in real time on social media what's going on. And as a parent with 2 children in the district, I want to know, just like we all want to know what's happening. Employment applications, so much easier to disseminate job openings, especially if they're not just for internal promotions. So we've talked about a lot of these already. And then implementation. Has anybody ever heard of an editorial calendar? Anybody want to take a guess as to what an editorial calendar is? So an editorial calendar is similar to that idea that I said earlier. What are you sharing? So you can actually schedule in advance everything but the things that are immediate, like the things we call evergreen. Holiday events. You have a municipal calendar a year in advance, I'm sure. There's something you can schedule for every single thing on that calendar. And then there are things that go in as necessary in a timely fashion. So you can be one step ahead of the game, scheduling, a reminder, we have this event here, reminder, our public meeting is X, here's where it's located. Those things can be scheduled out well in advance. I don't remember if I have it in here, but there is a tool called CO Schedule. It's $360 a year, which is very inexpensive when it comes to online management tools. $360 a year for CoSchedule. It allows you to schedule your social media posts, visuals, content. You can schedule them for as long as you need to. Caveat, whoever's managing it needs to know what's on there with an editorial calendar. Because if you have some breaking news, and I'll just give you an example because it's a controversial one. Let's say you have a gun show in your community and there was just a school shooting and the gun show is being promoted. You need to get it down, right? So it's that kind of thing. I mean, I use that because it's a very controversial issue and it's one that stands out. But I've seen other things like that where we're promoting something but there's this thing happening in the community and it looks like it's in bad taste. So you just do need to monitor those things. But it's a great tool for you to calendar your evergreen things. And that's the tools that streamline. That's one. There's another one called Hootsuite. I'm not a fan. It's a little bit more complicated. And while it's very usable, you want to make sure the person using it understands how to. And they all do allow you, if you care, to look at data. And I'm big at looking at data. Who's engaging? When are they engaging? Why does it matter? When are we seeing spikes? Are they going to certain pages of our website looking for information from social media? Should that be updated and become more relevant? So there's so much information you can get from it, not just from the finance perspective, but from all perspectives of government. And then, engaging. How are you going to engage? Who's going to do that? Is there somebody assigned to monitoring? Are you splitting it out? It's gotten to the point for me where I check in the morning. My team for my company checks during the day, and I check at night. You just keep an eye on things. And because we live and die by these, anyone not have their phone with them in this room? I knew it. Not even a single person raise their hand that they do not have their cell phone in the room. And we're just connected. So it's actually easy to do. And another thing that's important, and I'm going to get into all the ethics next, don't worry. I'm going to get into that part, but this is more fun. Visuals. If you still read the newspaper, which I do, what do you read first? What do you look at first? Shout it out. Pictures, then what? Headlines. And what do you do if you don't like the headline? You don't read it. You read the comics, there you go. You look for the funny stuff. That's why I post funny stuff every once in a while. One was about getting snow in April recently. Over it. So images, videos, those types of things are much more engaging to people. I'll give you an example. This little device here that I'm pointing at is called a Mevo. I'm recording my presentation. I will decide if I want to take small clips and use it on social media to educate people, right? I can reuse content. So when you have presentations at the municipal level that are of value to a larger audience, especially when you can't always get people to show up, I'm guilty. I don't go to a lot of township meetings. It's kind of hard to do when you're raising a family and running a business. But I like to see what's going on, and I know that they have the government access channel, but I can't always watch it when it's live. So, it's getting that information when I can get it. So it's making it easier for people. So you want to think about ways to do that, and visual is the number one way. We all read visually. I never read a headline that doesn't interest me. Like, whatever, move on, right? I look for the things that are engaging or that I care about. So that's really important. 94% equates to almost double the views and boosts when people when they have something visual to look at. 94% higher. So it's just fascinating to me. And for instance, on Twitter, tweets with images receive 150% more retweets. Anybody on Twitter out of curiosity? So I'll tell you, at a conference like this, if you wanted to be sharing information, I was just at a national conference in New Orleans 10 days ago where I spoke on content marketing. We had a hashtag. Does anybody not know what a hashtag is? It's okay. I would say it's the pound sign and some words or letters all in a string that when you go on to any social media platform, it allows you to search all the content relevant to that. So it could have been hashtag GFOAPA, did I get that right? GFOAPA 18, which would be a conference type hashtag. And if people were sharing information, whether it be, come to the XYZ dinner or thank you to, I can't read who the sponsor is of the breakfast. Central Region for sponsoring breakfast, or information that was shared in different programs because somebody may have had to step out and really wanted to get some information. I can tell you at LMA, Legal Marketing Association 18, we had over 6,000 tweets, original, 6,000. It was a conference, went for 4 days. The content was incredible. And I actually, many of us, because this is what we do for a living, read the feed because we had tracked programs. So if I couldn't be in this one and wanted to be in this one, I could still get that information from that other program. It's fabulous. Connected with new people, actually met one person who's now a prospective client who I met using this tool. So it's really interesting how you can use it even outside of what you do for thought leadership in your roles serving your municipality. So it's something to be aware of. The average internet user spends 88% more time on a website with video than without. How many of your websites have any sort of video on them? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Great, I'm going to say that this is a great opportunity to think about what you could be doing within a very low budget. I'm taping this right now. I bought the equipment, it's hooked up to my iPad. I can then edit it and use it however I want. It's not costing me anything to do that. So think about that. Video content can increase the chance of front page Google rankings by 53 times. You're probably not as concerned about SEO. You're going to show up when they search for your municipality, your website. However, if you want something on there to show up, it's important to know that video will help increase participation. 88% of the world's internet traffic will be video by 2019. Anybody watch anything on YouTube? Amazon Prime? Yeah. Your Xfinity Live? Netflix? These are all words that none of us knew just a few years ago. I'm very close to getting rid of our cable at home. Nobody, well, my husband will kill me because we have to watch NFL, but that's a whole other thing. Thank you. It's so interesting, though, because it really is, everything's video driven, and the millennial generation is learning by video. That's where they go. How many of you know how to teach new math? How many of you have kids who had to learn new math? How many of you Googled new math to complete a task to help teach your kids? You know, these are the types of things that we have to think about. It's video, right? I Google everything. Google as a verb. And it always comes to a video. How do I set my Outlook to do X? It's there, I guarantee you. How do I update my iPad? Right? There you go. Oh, Siri picked you? Oh, that's funny. I have my phone here. Shh. I don't want Siri to start talking to me. But it's interesting because video is really an important tool now. And there's so much we can do about it. 65% of people visit a website after viewing a video. So if the video is on, for example, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, people will go to your website. And then in terms of monitoring, it's really important, and I say these same things throughout. It's important to monitor and adjust your message. If people aren't engaging for some reason, is it the message or is it the audience? You're getting to know that, understanding why are they not engaging, how do you want them to engage, how is that content performing? It does matter. If you're trying to get a community vote to pass, it matters. I guarantee you, I have personally influenced the way people vote because they've asked me questions on Facebook. What does that Supreme Court decision mean? If they do this, how will it affect that? People read this stuff. And they do care because, as you know, when we get into the voting booths, we have no idea what those questions mean half the time. And if it affects your community, you need to educate people about those things, and this is one of the best ways to do it. And don't think they're reading the newspaper either. They're reading them online. More of your traditionalists and your baby boomers are reading the newspapers still, but they're also going online. Largest growing audience. So it's important to know that you can be influencing what you need to happen in your communities in a positive way by educating people. And then always refining that plan. So now we get into the fun part. Don't everybody pull out your cell phones at once. No, I'm kidding. So we talked a little bit about, I told you I'd give you some examples. Just last year, I'm down in Philadelphia in a business meeting, and my phone starts lighting up. The schools are on lockdown. This convict got loose, a prisoner escapes. They think he possibly may be armed and dangerous. He's running through, for those of you from the Bucks County area, I'm sure you heard about it, running through the woods near the schools, near the township building, everything's on lockdown. Shelter in place. This was all not, these are the news stories that were shared on social media. So it's breaking news on social media, breaking news on social media, breaking news. I mean, that's where you see it. I don't know about you, but I don't have my NBC app open all day long. So then the township and the school district started communicating with us very clearly. They were talking to one another, by the way, which was really nice to see, because that's really important. And we were getting information we needed as members of the community. And it was very clear, and these are, they're long examples, and I'm not going to read them, but it was really, in my opinion, well done. You're always going to have the naysayers, by the way. Oh, why did they lock down schools? This is ridiculous. You're always going to have those people. But then you're going to have those of us who are like, thank you for keeping our kids safe. And it went on. Prisoners still handcuffed, wearing orange shirt, wrapped in light-colored blanket to hide cuffs. Police still searching. Shelter-in-place order, where it is. Schools are closed. It just went on and on. But we were informed. And this is real time, and it was immediate, which meant they had to have a plan. Because you do not have time in real time to go up the chain and get approvals. You do not have time to do that. So, then we got a notice from the superintendent, how things were going, why there was going to be no school. Again, on Facebook, this is ridiculous. I have to go to work. Why can't they open the schools? But then what I tell the municipalities is don't respond. You will have community members who will respond for you. And what was the next response? Thank God they're trying to keep our kids safe. There are people in the neighborhood who would be happy to watch your kids. It was beautiful, because you're always going to have the naysayers, but sometimes the community will step up and have your back. And oftentimes in a situation like this, they will. Then the township, now this is on Facebook, sharing what was happening, giving updates. And then they were putting it on their page, and it was getting shared on the Doylestown group page, and the Doylestown Uncensored page, and the other page, and this page, and that page. But it was being shared, and people in the community were listening on social media. Newspaper doesn't have time to get it out, and they can get it on their website. They still have to write it, which means they have to verify it, which means there's still a lag, there's still a delay. I usually know that something has happened and can confirm it before I ever see the NPR notice. And it's usually within a half hour before, because they have to verify their sources. Whereas when it comes from the source, it's already verified, right? But there's other, crime prevention we've talked about. Community events. These are all different examples that I found when I was putting the presentation together. But I know you saw a lot of them yesterday from Cranberry, so I don't want to repeat that. But there are some barriers, and I'm sure you've all seen them. One is budget. A big one is buy-in, which is why I'm trying to convince you, because you're decision makers, that this is important. A lot of people think it's too time-consuming, which is why I like to share with you things like co-schedule and other monitoring tools. And really a lack of understanding, training, and policy, because I will say, don't just engage without a policy. Put the policy in place first, no matter how long it takes. Because that's a protection factor. That's a little bit of insurance. Are people always going to follow the policy? Well, I have some good examples where they don't. So the ethics, the pitfalls, risks, and liabilities. So I asked you already how many of you have a policy, and you answered, and I think I would say it was about a quarter of the room. So you have some great opportunities to go back and put policies in place. There was a study done. Are any of you familiar with the Rutledge, Taylor, and Francis group? They do municipal studies, very interesting information. This is a little bit dated, but they haven't done a new study yet. This was done in 2016 of how U.S. municipalities use social media. And they said based on their findings, most cities have integrated social media into daily operations. However, many do not provide effective social media policies to guide such use. This was specifically a city study. I do believe, and I know this is a generalization, that cities tend to adopt these things a little bit more quickly than the smaller municipalities and townships. So I was comfortable using it as an example. So in the survey, does the city have a social media policy? Of them, 81% had said no in 2016, and this was towards the end of 2016, so it's not that far off. That is scary to me, because they're on there. That was the thing, they're on there, but they're not, they didn't have policies. And then they talked a lot about who should be responsible to manage social media and who is managing social media within your cities. And I thought this was interesting. A lot have said it was just decentralized, or it was with their one central unit, like their PR team, or it was shared. Some had no idea who was managing their social media. That stuns me, because this is a public communication tool in real time. And if you don't know who is posting stuff about your entity, you had better find out. We've talked a lot about the elements and reasons and benefits, and so this just reiterates most of them was to communicate, most of them used to communicate, support mission and objectives, and then I was interesting. I think this data would be very different. The citizen engagement would really change in 2018 as compared to 2016. So I'm looking forward to when they come out with a new survey, because I want to compare that data. When you get a spreadsheet and put all that information in there, which you guys do every day. I'm really terrible at spreadsheets, by the way. It's something my husband does well. So I was like, honey, what formula do I need to figure this answer out? But it's interesting because it's great information to know. So in a social media policy, and again, some of you have them. So for those of you who do this, you can use this as a checklist. Do we have this? For those of you who don't, you can use it as a checklist. We need this. So it's relevant to all of you. Acceptable use. You need to address how is it acceptable for us to use this. In other words, we will not post profanity. What a concept. You think that would be known, but it's not. Because if you look at television, even our TV, our primetime TV shows have changed what is and what is not acceptable on daily television. I like to err on the side of no profanity. Just my preference. It's not about personal interest, it's about public interest. What's in the public's interest, not you as the person managing. That's the type of thing that goes into an acceptable use policy. And this is really where you do need your solicitors involved. That's really important. And I no longer practice law in the formal sense, so I don't want to give anyone the idea that I do. I maintain my license. I don't carry the liability insurance, so I don't practice in that way. but I often do work with our clients and their solicitors to put together the content, and then the solicitors review it. So it's very important to have that acceptable use statement in your policy. Who can create social media accounts? This is really important, by the way, because a lot of times people will say, oh, well, let's let the intern do it. Right, yeah. The social media page is then connected to their personal account. The intern, the person that's there for a short amount of time. Do not do that. You must have an email address that is associated with your entity and all of your social media platforms. Whether it's manager at, marketing at, social media at, I don't care what you make it. You have to create something that becomes its own entity so that you can manage these tools. It cannot be the intern. It cannot be the elected official who's not going to be there in 2 years. And that goes the same for an organization like this. I've been the president of various nonprofit organizations. It's not for me to create the profiles. It's for me to create it on their behalf with intellectual property that's theirs. Really important. I cannot tell you enough, because so many of us say, oh, my niece, my nephew, my daughter, my son, oh, they're in school, they're going for marketing, they can create it. No. Because when they're gone, you have no control over it. Really, really important. I cannot stress it enough. I can't tell you how many companies that I've had to go in, and it's taken me 4, 5, 6 months to get in touch with the person who doesn't want to be responsive in order for us to take over their social media accounts on the client's behalf. What are the procedures for establishing and overseeing social media? Who's permitted to post? Can it be anybody? Is it just a select few? Is it your PR partner or your marketing partner? Who's doing that? And what's the procedure for responding or not responding to comments? Super important. Like I give you examples all throughout. There's times that you do need to respond. And there's times that it's much better to let someone else respond for you, because it's just too self-serving if your municipality responds. And oftentimes the right thing will happen. And that's one of the beauties of social media. I do find that oftentimes the people will stand up on behalf of what is right. And of course, that's my opinion of what is right. Citizen content conduct. I love this example. Wisconsin University, and if I don't put my glasses on, I can't read it. The University of Wisconsin-Madison social media accounts, and they list them, are produced and maintained by the University Communications at UW Madison. Who's doing it? They answer that right up front. Links to content and other internet sites should not be construed as an endorsement to the organization entity. It's their little disclosure, right? While UW Madison does not regularly review content posted to social media sites, it shall have the right to remove any content for any reason. I think that's important. And they go into the list. By submitting content to any of our social media sites, the user understands and acknowledges that this information is available to the public, and it goes on. So many people who work within a government entity are proud to do what they do and often want to share their point of view. That's not wrong. We just want to make it clear that you don't serve everyone's point of view. You serve the public. And so those things are important to have in your policy and how you're going to state it, and you need to state it. What type of employee access are you going to allow? Is it employees? Now, and that's everyone who's paid. Is it just the paid? Is it elected? Who's being restricted? It's important to know these things. Because I can tell you, I still see municipalities who have intern-created social media platforms on a regular basis. The employee access portion of the policy should include, if applicable, that you're monitoring the employee's use of government-owned devices. There's no expectation of privacy. Again, it's very important. This also, I'm getting into employment law here. You have to have your solicitor review these things. Because in the employment law space, which I never practiced in employment law, is very, very specific and constantly changing. So this is something that should be reviewed regularly, just like your bylaws. How often do some of your entities review bylaws? Annually? Biannually? Every 10 years? Do you have bylaws? No bylaws. Okay. Do you have, what do you have that you use in your entities to govern how long somebody can be elected for, or how long they can serve? So it's all governed by state law. So you don't have any, so because I worked in Philadelphia, Philadelphia was not governed by state law. So that's why I'm asking that. So these are the important things that do need to, any of your policies, you have other policies. You have other policies in place? Are there regular review of policies or just when somebody sees fit to bring it up as a resolution? Either or? You want to have some process in place to review these things maybe annually or biannually to know that they are compliant with, in particular, employment law, because it changes so readily. Your employee code of conduct. I really like this. This is very simple. Disclose, protect, and use common sense. Disclose, if you're there and you're there on behalf of the municipality, disclose who you are. Transparency. Take care to protect the municipality and yourself with what you post. And, we can say this till we're blue in the face, but use common sense. I grew up in the city. I mean, common sense was ingrained in us. When you crossed the street, you looked both ways. And my kids were little, because they grew up on a farm, I would tell their friends' parents if they'd go into town, my kids live on a farm, they're not used to crossing the street. And that was the truth. I mean, yes, we'd go into Philly or we'd go here and go there, and I tell them to look both ways, but it wasn't a constant daily habit. And the habits are what creates common sense. So it's interesting that there's a lot of things that we don't know, that we assume are common sense, that sometimes we have to train people on. And then, of course, you always have to address the First Amendment rights in using public versus private social media profiles. And there's always, when people post the disclaimer, and that's fine, but we just have to be very mindful that a disclaimer is the virtual equivalent of having a t-shirt or sign hung around your neck that says, I have an opinion, but it doesn't mean anything if you want to fire me. It's just like, if somebody posts something, people have and will be fired for what they post. I'm sure you've seen examples. Has anybody had that happen in their community? Schools? Oh, I have some good examples of that. First Amendment does not apply to employers. In Pennsylvania, it's an Atwill state. How many of you deal with the employment issues within your entities? So just a couple of you. So you would be aware of these, but Atwill is important. One exception, of course, is the NLRB relates to posting about work or work-related matters that relate to protected concerted activity. Important to be aware of this. Again, this is when you get your solicitors involved. If you think you need to remove someone because they violated your policy or done something online that is egregious and you are an Atwill state, that's when, of course, the solicitor gets called in. So here's some interesting examples. School administrator roasts a kid on Twitter, promptly gets fired. The kid put their school, close school tomorrow, please. And then the teacher, or the administrator put, but then how would you learn how to spell tomorrow? I would have probably done the same thing, by the way, because I think that was common sense. But that's my opinion. They saw it as publicly shaming a student. Right, wrong, or indifferent, we all have our opinions, but I'm sharing with you the types of things that happen. My kids spelled tomorrow that way, I'd be quite frustrated myself. How many of you recall when the West York mayor responded to the controversial Facebook posts? I'm not going to ask if anyone's from West York. I'm not calling this out. I just think it's a very, not calling you out. I'm just saying that this was a very egregious example. And it's a very sensitive one. And I would go so far as to say he definitely did not use common sense. Moving day at the White House has finally arrived. Guns didn't kill 6 million Jews, but their government did. This was scary stuff. He then resigned. And divisive and deplorable is how it was called out. So, you know, we do see these things in Pennsylvania, folks, and we do need to be mindful of them. For some of you in the room who may have had to deal with this incident yourselves, you know that it sparks a sense of, you know, a little bit of a bellyache, as you will. Michigan firefighter fired after racist Facebook comments about Black Lives Matter. F Black Lives Matter. You are the epitome of a N, and if you think it's just Black lives, kiss my and go back to the fields. I can't even continue reading it. It's so wrong, right? We're all saying it's so wrong, but this is what happens on social media. Everybody has their opinions and their biases. So we do have to monitor. As much as I started out this program with you need to be here, you also need to monitor it, because these are real examples. Local governments should work with their IT staff to ensure that their social media policy includes necessary policies regarding security of data. That's really important, as we've seen in recent weeks with data breaches and increases to cybersecurity, which I was just asked, what's the #1 risk facing all businesses today in a media interview? And I said, cybersecurity by far. By far. And if you think you're not targeted, you are. I'm a small 8-person marketing and public relations agency in Doylestown, and my website was hacked. Okay? Now, it was a few years ago. Unfortunately, we caught it quickly. But by all means, we are all at risk. So make sure you involve anybody who handles your IT. And if you're using your neighbor's nephew to do your website, and your website is connected to your social media, and even if it's not, you need to make sure your website is protected. Because I can tell you, we do municipal websites. I've done municipal websites, and I know where they're coming from, and they're not protected. They don't have the right security protocols in place, oftentimes. And the last thing you want is somebody hacking your website, hacking into your social media, and then wreaking havoc on your entity. So include the guidelines regarding security of data and and make sure that they address password security. So for example, one of the things we do, anytime an employee leaves our firm or an employee of our client leaves that has access to the website backend, to social media profiles, all of the passwords are immediately changed. It is protocol, not, oh, well, I don't really think we can trust that. It's okay, we'll get to it. No, everything is changed. Doesn't matter if I trust the person or not, because I don't know where their computer is going to be and if that information is accessible on there and if somebody else is going to have access. So this is the type of protocol you want to put in place for your social media as well. Very important. I mean, these are minor things, by the way, because not everyone's going to have access to administer, to be the administrator of these things. So make sure you have that in place as well. And then, of course, the intellectual property piece. This is not minor. A lot of people don't think about it, but when you're posting content, if it's not owned by your entity, at least giving ownership credits. So in other words, a photographer came to your event and took photos. If you don't own the rights to the photos, you need to say, thanks, put the courtesy of so-and-so. Don't go on Google and do Google Images and screenshot something and then call it your own. I see this all the time. It's so easy to create images if you want images. There's if anybody's a little tech savvy, just a little bit, there's an application called Canva, C-A-N-V-A. I use it all the time to create a lot of these images that you see in here. I am not a graphic designer. I can't design much at all, but I can create these things using these tools if I don't want to engage my graphic designer in the office for the statistics, for those types of things. And it's easy, but we're creating them. So make sure it's an original or attributed. Another big area that we see is defamation that comes up with social media. And this is a big fear of many municipalities, many entities for that matter. So I want to define it just a little bit. I'd like this image to define defamation. Is it a false statement of fact and published? You're claiming it's fact, but it's false, and it's published. If it's published and of public concern, and it's negligent, and there's damage, so look at the way this goes, right, with your arrows, then it's considered libel, no knowledge of falsity, malicious. I haven't seen a lot of this in the municipal setting, but it's something that you want to address in your policies to say not to post a false statement. It has to be verifiable, that's malicious, those types of things. And just people need to know that. And you want to protect your entity. And then, of course, privacy. Who can view the profile? Who can post comments and other content on the profile? Who can search for social media? All of this is regulated. When you set up a profile, you can set up all of these parameters. And a lot of people, it's actually easy to do when you first set it up, and it's easy to do after it's set up. You just have to know how to get there. And if you don't know how to get there, what can you do? Really loud, everybody, come on, wake up. Google it! I know this is a lot of information, but truthfully, you can Google it. There's so many presentations that I give that I just literally give the link to the Google explanation on how to do it, because they can do it better than I can. So these are some of the things that you want to be aware of in terms of privacy. And with everything you do, with every email, with every post, just assume that it's public. Every internal statement and email you write, assume that it's public. Just did crisis for a company out in Utah, And we had to write an internal statement to their 400 employees. And I explained to the CEO that this statement, while internal, was being written for the media, because I was assuming it was going to be leaked. I'm not a skeptic. I'm just assuming it's going to be leaked, because that's how I'm going to protect it. Everything, assume it's public. And then, how are you going to handle legal compliance? The policies need to include compliance language. They need to be applicable to federal, state, and local laws, regulations, and policies. So again, why you want to get your solicitors involved. By the way, solicitors get very mad if I don't say that. Be aware of the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act and how it applies. Whether or not you have retention and preservation requirements. And you always comply with the social media platform policies, which, by the way, means not having two of the same profile. So a lot of people back when used to go on Facebook and they create a personal profile and then a business profile of themselves. That's a violation of the Facebook policies. Do they enforce it? No, because they want to say they have 10 billion people on there, but that's a whole nother thing. I always want to see the entities that we work with abiding by all platform policies so that they can never be questioned. And then an example of a social media platform policy, this was just last year when LinkedIn, and we're seeing a lot of them right now, in fact. Twitter just sent one out last night that they've updated their policies. Facebook sent one out last week that they updated their policies because of the data mining issue. So we see this regularly, and we're going to see it more and more. A question that often comes up in these programs is, what about social media discussions regarding an action in question and how it relates to the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act? And I polled a couple of attorneys that I work with who represent municipalities because I really wanted to know their opinion. And of course, most of them are like, don't let them go on social media. And I'm like, well, there's a way to do it safely. So they caution against official two-way dialogue. So depending on your corporate culture, as you will, you may not want to have two-way communication if it's not right in your community yet, if there's not a way to manage it carefully. Others believe it's good practice. So I think I polled about 15 different municipal attorneys last year on that very question, because I really wanted a sense of what would you counsel your municipality to do. And the more conservative, and frankly, the more Republican folks are like, no two-way. And the more liberal are like, no, we want them to communicate, we want them talking. So it was interesting because it literally came down almost on party lines. Yes?
Isn't that more of an issue of making policy versus communicating information?
Yes. So it depends on what you're communicating. So the question was, if I repeat it, is it a matter of policy versus just communicating? And the answer is yes. But we need to be aware of it, because if we're going to use it to communicate policy, and things that are happening in meetings and when votes are coming up and things like that, we do want to be mindful. So that's where we just want to keep it, it can become an issue. So if I didn't give you enough examples of when all goes awry, this was in our own community. The New Hope Soulbury School Board Director blasted by Soulbury supervisors for a Facebook post that reportedly threatened violence. I'm glad some people are wearing safety pins. They might come in handy as a suture for any lacerations you get when you are macro-aggressively punched in the face for being such a slacktivist jackass. I don't know what to say. It's rare that I'm left speechless. This one leaves me speechless. Then he apologized, and the apology was shared. So we're going to get to, in the last remaining time, which isn't that much, 15 minutes. Responding and versus reacting to comments and your questions. So I like this example of when simplicity is best in a response. And if you've noticed, that, watch when something blows up in the media, because I love watching this. When something blows up and there is a really solid response and then you never hear about it again, versus when somebody hides behind the camera or they don't answer and then the media goes at them, and it becomes a much bigger issue. So this was a really interesting incident that happened in our community at our high school. There was a huge fight between Central Bucks West and a non-high school club team at Ridley. I want to be clear that this was a non-high school team. And there were allegations that it was a premeditated. It put our top ice hockey player in the hospital. Head injuries. It was bad. My daughter came running home. It was just, the whole entire community was up in arms. It was a very violent fight. And this was, I think, last March. But the Ridley Hockey Club president said the following. The Ridley hockey program views the actions of some of our players in the hockey game against Central Bucks West last night as indefensible. We are disgusted and appalled with the decisions of our players and in no way condone their actions. It goes on. We didn't hear about the story the next day. It was super egregious. It was super violent. And as a parent, it was very upsetting. And yet, we didn't hear about it the next day. Why? Because they made a statement. I can guarantee you, if they had lawyers involved, the lawyers didn't want them to say this. But it went away. The press stopped. And that's really important when you have an issue, a reputation management issue, and you want to stop it in its tracks. How do you feel if you see somebody running up courtroom steps saying no comment, hiding the face of the accused? Tell me, how do you feel? What do you feel about that person? Guilty. They're lying. Right? They made a statement here. Look, we take responsibility for this. This is not what we would expect of our players, and they are going to be disciplined. However, a lot of people say, is it better to remain silent? And I give you that example because I worked in criminal law of the people running up the courtroom steps, hiding their faces. Because that's really the first thing you think is they have something to hide, right? It's the first thing you're going to think. And I love this quote by Benjamin Franklin: as we must account for every idle word, so must we account for every idle silence. When you are quiet on an issue, people will make assumptions. And I'm not going to say the quote about what happens when you make assumptions. You all know it. So there are some alternatives, and this is the type of thing you can put in your social media policy. These are the types of things you can put in your rapid response policy, your crisis management. We are aware of the situation and are working to gather the facts. We will share verified information publicly when we are able. Truth is, you may never be able to share verified public information publicly. But you have made a statement. It's a statement that says nothing. I get it. But you've said something. You're not hiding behind the no comment. These are the types of things you want to have in that arsenal so you don't have to go up the chain to get approval when you need something immediate. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. We invite you to attend our public meeting to express your opinion to council. Oh, people love that. Well, I don't have time to come to council. You have time to be on social media, right? But you've responded to them because people just want to know that they were heard. most of the time. And believe me, at all of the town hall meetings, we always know the one or two people who are going to show up. We know what they're going to say, and we know how to deal with them. And we give them their time. Let them say it. Because the majority of the people in the room can't wait for them to be quiet and sit down. I almost said shut up, but we don't say that in my house. We appreciate your feedback. Hearing from our constituents is important to us. We invite you to share any further thoughts in a follow-up letter or email. Put it in writing. So these are some interesting things that you can have, and I think these are really important types of statements because you're not always going to have time to go up the chain and get approval on something that needs to be posted publicly. And then there's those times when you want to put on a full court press because it's positive. Bristol Borough, anybody from Bristol here? They did a fabulous job at doing this small business revolution last year. It was so much fun. This is a hashtag, My Bristol Municipality. They used this to get the community engaged, to get them talking about voting, to get them involved. Out of 14,000 nationwide municipalities were in this contest for a $500,000 revitalization and marketing prize offered by Shark Tank's Robert Herjavec. So, I mean, think about it, $500,000 because they engaged. It's a lot of money. You know, and then there was press coverage. And they were able to do all of this, get everyone involved. They won this $500,000 prize, and I have not gone back to see what they've done in terms of implementing it and following up, but that's something I'm going to be doing. And I did mention to you Hootsuite and CoSchedule. Buffer.com is another tool for managing social media. It's not one that I have used. I did use Hootsuite for a long time. CoSchedule is less expensive and more efficient, so that's the one I've chosen for all of our clients. And the other thing is, if you do work with an agency, a web company, anybody who's going to manage your digital platforms, make sure you own all of the platforms. In other words, have your own CoSchedule set up, not theirs. Make sure your website is owned by the municipality and you have all the passwords, your Google Analytics, all of those things. Again, I mentioned that with your social media sites. These are your platforms. You don't want to be beholden to a company like mine or anyone else's. You want to own all of those things. And I think that's very important. So for example, when we set up CoSchedule for a client, we set it up with their social media email address, the one that they never had, but I had them create, and their contact information. Because when they are no longer working with us, it needs to be easy for them to continue to manage their platforms. You don't want any barriers to future success, so we always need to be looking forward. And with that, I'm going to release you to questions, and I hope I'll be able to answer them. We have about 8 minutes left. Yes?
I got a couple questions. One, can you speak a little more about, I mean, the focus here was the municipal-owned social media accounts, but those that are government officials or management of the entity and commenting on government business on personal accounts and that gray area there.
So the question is, can I talk a little bit more about the gray area between the municipal-owned platforms and the elected officials who have their own, or anyone else who have their own profiles, and that gray area? I can. It's a matter of education, and it's a matter of people understanding that while they have a First Amendment right to share what they want to share, they need to do it in a careful way. They are, anybody here a member of a fraternity or sorority when they went to college? Come on, don't be shy. Okay, so I remember when I pledged Delta Zeta. If anybody had Delta Zeta in the room? When I pledged Delta Zeta, we were told, never go to a fraternity party wearing your letters. Letters were the D and the Z, right? Like, that's ridiculous. I want people to know that I'm affiliated with this group. I love this group. I love the philanthropy that we do. Why would they tell us not to wear letters? Anybody have their parents say, they're going to ask where your parents are? Or if you go out dressed like that, they're going to ask where your mother is. Or have you said it? Or your father? Or if you do that. You're representing an entity. And it's like we were educated with some of the policies that we represented this entity, this greater thing than just us. We need to educate everyone who works within our organizations that there are certain things that they should do and certain things that they shouldn't. Now, can you always slap their hand? No. Can you monitor all of it? No. You can't. I mean, that's the gray area. The gray area is we can't force everybody to do the right thing. However, we can educate them, and education is the most important step. For anybody who has children in the room, we know we teach our kids or I hope we teach our kids from a very young age to make the right choices about substances. If they go to the doctor because they've had a sports injury, ask if that medication is addictive. That's what we need to do today. It's no different. We educate our families. We take time to do that. We educate one another. But we need to educate the people who work for us and for the public, who serve the public, as best we can. And I think that's really the gray area. It's just as best we can. But at least we can sleep better at night. Because then when you have that incident that goes out of control, the fireman who posts something so egregious, or the mayor who goes off the rocker, as you will, trying to light it up. You've at least given them the policies. You know, my husband, who works in sales, and I'm going to end on this. He always said in training, he does a lot of training, give people the rules and tools for success. Everybody can succeed if they choose to follow the rules and use the tools. But if you don't give them to them, if you don't teach them, do not expect them to succeed. So that gray area is about giving people the rules and the tools for success, the way your organizations define it. With that, I can take about one more question. Okay, bet you're all ready for your next coffee. Thank you.